Dundas delayed the cancellation and the abolition of slavery.
If you have time, if you have real life struggles, yes, and you really have to hustle to get your food on the table for your family, and that's where your struggle's at, you don't have time to dig up something that happened 200 years ago and walk past a street that's been named that for so long, or change a sports franchise name from 200 years ago. It's all just, they don't realize how good they have it, and that's why they have the time to go looking for things to be upset about.
What's the new name they want to name it?
Oh, they want to name it Sankofa Square.
Yeah, that sounds like you're going to Mexico.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in downtown Toronto, and welcome to the latest edition of Cancel Culture Madness, the Hogtown edition. See, folks, I'm standing here at Yonge-Dundas Square, but apparently not for long. It's going to get a rebranding. Indeed, the city wants to change the name of Dundas Street. It wants to change the name of the two Dundas subway stations. And what's the reason? Well, they say that the person this was named for, and that's Henry Dundas, who lived more than 200 years ago, he's got a checkered history.
He also promoted taking children, young girls and boys, to bring them, take them away from their parents and bring them to England, to other parts of Europe as slaves, so they could multiply, procreate, so there will be enough people, enough labor, slave labor, in order to service the plantations.
But is that really the case? I mean, we've looked into the matter. Contrary to popular belief in the woke circles, Henry Dundas was not a slave owner. He wasn't even pro-slavery. In fact, he was anti-slavery. It seems that their only argument is that he wasn't quick enough in approving legislation to end slavery. My boss, Ezra Levant, on a recent edition of his show, The Ezra Levant Show, he was interviewing a descendant of Henry Dundas. That would be Jennifer Dundas. Check out this clip.
What he is criticized for is the fact that he took William Wilberforce's motion and proposed an amendment that abolition should be gradual. And in his speech in support of that amendment, he laid out his plan. And his plan was to eradicate or abolish the slave trade within a time to be determined, later determined to be 7 or 8 years, and that slavery itself would be eradicated by eliminating what they called hereditary slavery. So if a person owned a slave, they also owned the children of those slaves. He would have put an end to that so that every child born to a slave after that would be a free person entitled to education, although there was also this idea that the child would have to work to pay back the cost of their education. Nonetheless, within a generation, his proposal would have eradicated slavery within a generation.
Now, does that sound like a white supremacist to you folks? And also consider the fiscal hit. We're talking more than $12 million just in name change signage alone. And this is in a climate of 2023 when we see homelessness off the charts. We see issues with violent crime. There are transportation problems, and yet suddenly the renaming of a street and subways and a square is a priority. I don't understand that, folks. In any event, let's see what the residents of Toronto have to say about this latest misuse of their tax dollars. Sir, what do you think about the city renaming Yonge-Dundas Square? They want to get rid of Dundas as a street name, Dundas as a subway station name. It's going to cost over $12 million just the name change alone on the signage. What do you make of that?
I think it's a little bit ridiculous. I think Dundas, everyone knows it as Yonge-Dundas Square. Everyone knows it as Dundas Street. So to change it for that cost just doesn't make any sense financially, especially in today's day and age where costs are going up. And I would rather see that money go elsewhere where there's a greater need.
I think it's absolutely terrible. This has been Dundas Square for all the downtowners and even people that come in to visit. It's costing them all this money they should give to charity or something. I think it's terrible. We know this is Dundas Square, you know? And what the name almost sounds like, what's the new name they want to name it?
They want to name it Sankofa Square.
Yeah, that sounds like you're going to Mexico.
I think it is very popular from so old. So I think they don't need to change, right? Yeah, I think they have to keep remain same.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't have a problem with the name Dundas myself, so...
It's funny, we can't find anyone with a problem with the name Dundas.
Definitely would say, because I work with, in our work, we work with a lot of Indigenous communities, that I think it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable. Name changes can be considered for reasons. I mean, we changed, I don't know how many decades ago, when the universities used to have funding directly to from churches. Okay. And so Wilfrid Laurier was Waterloo Lutheran. Okay. So different universities had these affiliations, and then more government funding was provided, and there was a break essentially from some of the church support, and names got changed.
To me, it's honestly just virtue signaling. It's just everyone wants to feel like they're fighting something that doesn't even necessarily need to be fought, especially by the people who would be most affected by it. As I said myself, I'm Black and I'm Spanish, and I see the things that are being torn down, statues and things like that. And I think it's just this desire to feel like a victim and you're saving and doing something good, as opposed to really taking time to become versed in the subject and not just jump on the latest trend or fad.
I think it sucks. There's no reason for it, period. There's no reason for it. Mr. Dundas did nothing wrong. He was never a slave trader. He was never a slave owner. And everyone knows around the world Dundas Square as Dundas Square. So why the hell change it? I mean, there's no reason.
Unfortunately, I think that there might be better causes to spend the money on at this time. A lot of the homeless issues, all the other issues. So I think it's unfortunate that they're doing it at this time.
Not worth it.
Not worth it? How about yourself, man?
No, let history be history. Leave it Dundas. Yeah.
No, sir, when we delve into the history of Dundas, it's named after Scottish politician Henry Dundas. He was not pro-slavery. He was actually anti-slavery. It seems that his foes, their main cause of concern is he didn't do enough fast enough, and that's why they want him canceled. It seems like a bit of a stretch to cancel somebody who was anti-slavery to begin with.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't know much about Dundas himself, the history of Dundas. All I know is this is known as Dundas. Everyone knows Dundas. There's many different variations of Dundas. Like I believe it's a town in Scotland or something like that.
Yes.
So just to change that for just a little historical fact or maybe a misfact, maybe like I said, I don't know much about it, but to change the name to, I believe it's, I don't just announced today.
It is going to be called
Sankofa, I think
Sankofa Square.
Yeah. So what exactly is Sankofa? And then are we now going to go back and look at like maybe Sankofa means something totally different, totally something unacceptable?
Well, guess what? If he didn't do enough, why didn't you do enough? You know, don't blame the man who, you put one job on one guy for the whole country. Do it yourself, man. In the meantime, leave Dundas Square as Dundas Square because it's Dundas Square, man. That's what it'll always be to everyone.
The challenge with rewriting history is it's contextual at the timing. Certain things were socially acceptable. I'm not claiming they were right at the time, though certain things happened. To rewrite history is a challenge in that sense, in that what you want to do is learn.
Why not just erect a plaque explaining the situation as opposed to spending more than $12 million?
Especially with all the homeless people we have and the housing that we need. Put the money where it should be.
Do we have that kind of money in this kind of economic climate?
I think they have to spend on the people, don't spend on just changing the name, right?
Right.
So they're now people are on crisis, so they have to spend money on the people. Yeah.
Well, you look at like what happened in the Soviet Union when city names were changed at the end of that when the wall came down and it went back to being Russia. So, statues were torn down, names were changed, they went back to original names. So I don't know, City Kitchener was Berlin till after the war.
That's true. Yeah.
So all these sorts of things, I don't even know if you necessarily need the signage and keep up the current, like what things are called now. I mean, sometimes they just change.
Yeah, well, I mean, sadly, I think we're at a point now where people are either willfully ignorant or they just. I don't think facts really is the go-to thing anymore right now. It sadly is like more feelings. There's so many contradictions in the things that we're seeing right now. And if somebody's made up their mind and there's enough of the mainstream media spinning a certain narrative, that is what they're defending. And that's why there's so many shut down words and phrases to stop discourse. Instead of being able to challenge somebody's opinion who doesn't see eye to eye, right now they just spit out their little quick talking points that they've had shoved down their throats, and they can't really defend it, so they're just quick to turn away. So my point with that is you can give them all the historical facts, but if the news is telling them a different story, if they're being taught in school, it's a different thing. I don't know how much impact it would have. I would agree with you. I heard you speaking to the other lady. I would agree, erect the plaque while maintaining the name, while maintaining it before you go and spend all that money, and let them learn that way. As opposed to her suggestion was to remove it or change the name and then put a. I think everyone's too sensitive right now, and I think that's basically a sign that there's not that many problems. If you have time, if you have real life struggles, yes, and you really have to hustle to get your food on the table for your family, and that's where your struggle's at, you don't have time to dig up something that happened 200 years ago and walk past a street that's been named that for so long, or change a sports franchise name from 200 years ago. It's all just, they don't realize how good they have it, and that's why they have the time to go looking for things to be upset about.
Well, there you have it, folks. Aside from one lady who was kind of lukewarm to the idea of changing the name Dundas to something else, everyone we spoke to was against the idea. Certainly, the prevailing theme is that it's a waste of money. So if Mayor Olivia Chow and the city councillors of Toronto think that they are speaking for the people of Hogtown, I invite them to come to Yonge-Dundas Square and, talk to the people themselves like we did, because there is absolutely no appetite to spend more than $12 million on yet another grotesque example of virtue signaling. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Well, folks, if you feel like we do, and the majority of people here on the square, that renaming Yonge-Dundas Square and renaming Dundas Street is just a ridiculous and expensive piece of virtue signaling, please go to savedundas.com. That's savedundas.com. There is absolutely no good reason for renaming the street, the subway stations, and the square, which, of course, is probably why City Council has voted in favor of doing so. Unbelievable. SaveDundas.com.